Hello, good morning, guys. Here we are back Wednesday morning. It is hat day for our school, so I'm going to wear a hat inside today, even though I would normally say not to. But I have to support Arizona and where I'm from, and apparently my dog has to too. But we're not going to do two takes. We're going to do one take, and we're going to have him right here. All right, come on down on me. All right. So here we are in Chapter 2, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Again, Scholastic says that I need to do a disclaimer before I read any story. I am allowed to read this story for Scholastic before every video. Again, I'm allowed to read any of these stories for Scholastic for every video. So there we go. Here we go. It's Chapter 2. Okay. Now, again, before we get started, you guys read about Edward. You read about how he's not real, and he's this furry little rabbit from China. I want you guys to make predictions on what Chapter 2 now could be about. There's no title for it, so I can't give you that kind of prediction. So make a quick prediction to your parents, brothers, siblings, to yourself. High five yourself when you're done about what you think is going to happen next. Go and hit the pause button now. Beautiful. All right, so here we go. We're going back to it. Chapter 2. And in this manner, Edward's day passed one unto the other. Nothing remarkable happened. Oh, there was an occasional small domestic drama. Once, while Abilene was at school, the neighbor's dog, a male brittled boxer, inexplicably named Rosie, came into her house uninvited and unannounced, lifted his leg onto the dining room table, spraying the whole white table with urine. He then trotted over and sniffed Edward before Edward even had time to consider the implications of being sniffed by a dog. He was in Rosie's mouth, and Rosie was shaking him back and forth vigorously, growling and drooling. Fortunately, Abilene's mother walked past the dining room and witnessed Edward's suffering. "Drop it!" she shouted to Rosie, and Rosie, surprised into obedience, did as he was told. Edward's silk suit was stained with drool. His head ached for several days afterward, but it was his ego that had suffered the most damage. Abilene's mother had referred to him as it, and she was more outraged at the dog urine on the tablecloth than she was about the indignities that Edward had suffered in the jaws of Rosie. But then there was the time that a maid new to the Tulane household, eager to impress her employers with her diligence, came upon Edward sitting on his chair in the dining room. "What's this bunny doing here?" she said out loud. Edward did not care at all for the word bunny. He found it derogatory in the extreme. Little photo of Rosie taking Edward inside there. Bad dog. The maid bent over and looked into his eyes. She said. She stood back up. She put her hands on her hips. "I reckon you're just like every other thing in the house, something needing to be cleaned and dusted." And so the maid vacuumed Edward Tulane. She sucked each of his long ears up to the vacuum cleaner hose. She pawed at his clothes, beat his tail. She dusted his face with brutality and efficiency. And in the zeal to clean him, she vacuumed Edward's gold pocket watch right off of his lap. The watch went into his maw of the vacuum cleaner with a distressing clank, and the maid did not even seem to hear. When she was done, she put the dining room chair back to the table, and uncertain about exactly where Edward had belonged, she finally decided to shove him in amongst the dolls on the shelf in Abilene's bedroom. "That's right," she said. "There you go." She left Edward on the shelf at the most awkward and inhuman angle. His nose was actually touching his knees, and he waited there with the dolls, twittering and giggling at him like a flock of demented and unfriendly birds. Abilene came home from school and found him missing and ran from room to room, calling his name. "Edward!" she shouted. "Edward!" There was no way, of course, for him to let her know where he was. No way for him to answer. He could only sit and wait. When Abilene found him, she held him close, so close that Edward could feel her heart beating. "Edward," she said. "Oh, Edward, I love you. I never want you to be away from me." The rabbit, too, was experiencing some great emotion. But it was not love. It was annoyance that he had been mightily inconvenienced, that he had been handled by the maid as a cavalry and inanimate object. A serving bowl, say, or a teapot, perhaps, was how he was treated. The only satisfaction to be had from the whole affair was that the new maid was dismissed immediately. Edward's pocket watch was located later, deep within the bowels of the vacuum cleaner, dented, but still in working condition. "Sir Edward," he said, "your timepiece, I believe?" The Rosie affair and the vacuum cleaner incident, those were the great dramas of Edward's life, until the night of Abeline's 11th birthday, when at the dinner table, as the cake was being served, the ship was announced. And that's the end of chapter 2. Okay, I wrote down some questions so I didn't forget, so don't mind me looking over here. Okay, first question is, how does Edward feel about himself? Again, how does Edward feel about himself? All right, some of the answers here in this chapter and also in the first chapter that I read. Second question is, what upset Edward most about Rosie? What upset Edward most about Rosie? Remember, Rosie being the dog. And the last question is, where did the new maid leave Edward? Where did the maid leave Edward? Again, you can write these comments and notes down into a journal. You can take a picture of it, send it to me, or just simply send a response in Seesaw or Class Dojo, either one that's good to you. Remember, answering complete sentences. All right, so the first question would be Edward feels about himself is, or how Edward feels about himself is, and that's a good way to start it off. All right, that's the end of chapter 2. I'll see you guys in chapter 3.